the most valuable space artifacts sold for millions of dollars.
It's shocking how much people will pay for the historic artifacts associated with humanity's greatest achievements in space exploration. As the astronauts of the Apollo, Gemini, and early Soviet programs retired their well-worn spacesuits and personal items, a contingent of avid collectors emerged who eagerly sought to pay top dollar for these items. From rare moon rocks to iconic spacesuits, here are the most overpriced space artifacts that have sold for millions of dollars. Holding the dubious honor as the lowest priced artifact on our list is the humble notebook used by Apollo 13 Commander Jim Lovell during that ill-fated mission. On April 13, 1970, an oxygen tank aboard the Apollo 13 service module exploded, crippling the spacecraft over 200,000 miles from Earth. In the aftermath, Lovell and his crew were left with limited power and carbon dioxide removal while fighting to return home. With mission control, Lovell meticulously worked through the complex calculations necessary to redirect their trajectory using the lunar module as a lifeboat. His notebook contains the critical steps taken to preserve enough thrust for course corrections while minimizing the burn time of precious fuel cells. After the ordeal was over, Lovell held onto the notebook as a reminder of the mission's grueling struggle and triumph of the human spirit. It was eventually donated to heritage auctions with a portion of the proceeds supporting the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation. Bidders clearly recognized the invaluable artifact's role in saving 3 lives. Though it sold at a bargain price of $388,375 in December 2011, out of all personal items, it tells perhaps the most compelling story of the dangers and dedication to be found in space exploration. A pivotal piece of the Apollo 15 mission was the joystick used by Commander David Scott to pilot the Falcon lunar module to its safe landing on the moon's surface. Designed by Marquardt Aeroneutronics, this unique controller featured thrust buttons on the handle and a thumb-operated pivot that activated the module's descent engine and 4 interconnected rocket pods. With millimeter precision required, the joystick assisted automated computer guidance with real-time manual inputs. During the Falcon's fateful landing in the moon's rugged Hadley Apennine region, the joystick was clutched by Scott's experienced hands. With fuel down to 30 seconds worth, he overrode the computer and manually guided the cramped cockpit to one of the program's smoothest touchdowns ever achieved. Emerging victorious, Scott's joystick would be engaged for over 66 hours as the astronauts explored the surface, collecting soil, driving the lunar rover, and deploying scientific gear. It was later recovered for display at the Smithsonian before being included in a 2009 auction by Sotheby's. Given its unique role in human history's first powered descent to another world, it's little wonder the joystick from mankind's pioneering third lunar landing would sell in New York for $327,870. Among the various pieces of survival equipment brought to the lunar surface by Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong was a simple but innovative device, a water dispenser. Resembling a metallic bottle with an attached trigger sprayer, the dispenser allowed the astronauts to precisely measure out drops of water for rehydrating food or drink. With the extreme conditions on the moon leaving little room for error, conservation of resources was of utmost priority. Stored on the exterior of their extravehicular pack, Buzz and Neil could easily access the dispenser during their moonwalk to moisten dry meals or clean equipment. Weighing just under 2 pounds while full, it offered a sanitary alternative to drinking directly from the suit's water supply. After returning from the historic first mission, Buzz Aldrin retained the dispenser in his personal collection. Over 5 decades later, he included it in a Sotheby's auction commemorating the 53rd anniversary of Apollo 11. Given that Buzz's own hands delivered the dispenser to another world, it's unsurprising that the item would realize $327,600 from a passionate bidder. Among the trove of historic documents from America's first lunar landing was a single sheet of paper that laid out the meticulous plans for the most watched event in history, the touchdown of the Eagle on the Sea of Tranquility. This two-sided landing phase flight plan provided Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin an overview of their descent from orbit insertion, through the separation of the lunar module and extending down to their dramatic shuttlecock maneuver just prior to touchdown. It also detailed the sequence of actions over the next hour on the moon's surface. Handwritten on the sheet are real-time notes made by mission control commenting on the module's position and trajectory corrections. These jottings recorded the nail-biting final stages of the risky landing in July 1969. When Buzz Aldrin consigned this artifact to Sotheby's decades later, it was hailed as the keyframe document of the most important moment in space exploration. After just 9 minutes of bidding, its significance was evident as the winning bid for the flight plan paper hit $327,600. In the hands of its new owner, the planned script preserves an unbroken line from the annotators in Houston guiding Eagle down with pinpoint precision, to the billions of eyes watching worldwide with bated breath. To ensure nothing was forgotten in that fleeting 21 hours allotted for exploration of the lunar surface, Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong relied on a set of detailed cue cards during their extravehicular activity, or EVA. Mounted inside the capsule, the triple-sized papers provided step-by-step instructions for critical procedures like emergency egress from the landing craft, deployment of science equipment, and sample collection protocols. From donning safety gear to jettisoning excess items before departure, every task was accounted for. Each oversized card was inscribed in Aldrin's handwriting with "flown to the lunar surface on Apollo 11. It's believed this particular set was used on the command module console by Mission Control to follow the astronauts' progress. 5 decades later, as the sole crew to realize man's dream of walking another world, these yellowed reminder sheets carried immense historical meaning. At the auction, after heated bidding, their $352,800 value underscored how even scraps of paper dimensionalized one of humanity's most astounding achievements. For anyone who speculated what mysteries our abiding next voyage to the moon may yield, these cards offer insight into diligent preparations that transformed science fiction into unprecedented reality. Among the essential materials that enabled Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin to safely land Eagle on the moon was a humble 69-page checklist detailing the procedures to prime and activate crucial systems on the lunar module. Used by Mission Control to verify readiness before undocking from the command module in lunar orbit, this document methodically walked flight directors through powering on modules such as electrical propulsion, environmental control, and navigation. It ensured complex subsystem protocols were synchronized properly for simulation runs and the upcoming precision touchdown attempt. What makes this system's activation checklist especially remarkable is the handwritten times and initials added under controllers' signatures. Being opened and closed so many times, its fragile onion-skin pages also bear folds and handling marks accrued during real-time preparations. When offered by Sotheby's alongside other flown Apollo artifacts, it drew vigorous bidding and validated the item's central role in greenlighting mankind's inaugural lunar expedition. In the end, its realized sale price of $567,000 appropriately recognized how even anonymously scrawled sheets helped guide heroes to fulfill President Kennedy's daring goal. Among the many administrative records generated by the exhaustive Apollo 11 mission planning was a single-bound booklet containing a succinct written summary of the entire 8-day voyage. This thick packet, dubbed a complete flight plan, mapped out every stage of the operation from launch through translunar injection, lunar orbital operations, landing and liftoff procedures, and finally return to a Pacific splashdown. At 138 total pages, no contingency was left unaddressed. What makes this particular copy especially notable is the handwritten inscription across the front, "Flown to the Moon Apollo 11," signed by Buzz Aldrin. As lunar module pilot, Buzz carried this flight plan book in his personal preference kit, consulting its timelines and procedures during the pivotal journey. When offered up in Sotheby's 2022 anniversary sale, the emotional resonance of holding the realization of a century of dreams in one's hands was readily apparent. Bidding rapidly surpassed predictions to the final sale price of $819,000. While NASA's Apollo missions captured international fame, the Soviet space program was also actively pursuing samples from the moon in the 1960s to 70s.
For serious collectors of space memorabilia, what are the important qualities they're looking for?
So they're looking for items that have really great provenance, and generally that's something that came directly from an astronaut. Items that have flown in space, that have been in lunar orbit, that have gone to the moon's surface. Those are really big areas that people collect in. And then things that were signed by astronauts or owned directly by astronauts. So those are kind of the three top areas.
Through robotic probes like Luna 16, they secretly managed to return around 300 grams of lunar soil and basalt back to Earth. Several grains from these Soviet lunar collections ended up in the hands of private collectors through an obscure chain of events. In 1993, 3 minuscule moon rock fragments were sold at auction, fetching an impressive $442,500. Intriguingly, when the Israeli owner reoffered the rare relics 25 years later, the world had only grown more enamored with space exploration and collecting prestigious artifacts. After intense bidding at Sotheby's, an anonymous buyer swooped in with the astronomical amount of $855,000 to procure physical pieces of the inky celestial body the Soviets had gained. And so through twists of fate, snippets of the Cold War space race ended in a private collection tokenized as the actual rocks that stirred global intrigue. On October 4, 1957, a beach ball-sized metallic sphere launched aboard an S-7 rocket sparked the beginning of the space race by becoming the world's first artificial satellite. While Sputnik 1 was a mere 184-pound probe, its legacy would reshape the 20th century geopolitical landscape. Even before Sputnik's success, Soviet engineers had forged ahead with crafting full-scale mock-ups to progress satellite development. Among these prototypes was a test model measuring over 2 feet wide, used for engineering checks of Sputnik's inner systems, outer shields, and aerodynamic profile. Still marked with identifying stencils and handling scuffs from 1957, this 1/3 scale model came to represent the dawn of spaceflight at the onset of the Cold War. 6 decades later, it became the star lot at Bonham's anniversary auction with an astonishing final bid of $847,500 US. When the chronometer issued to Apollo 15 commander, David Scott, failed just prior to launch, a replacement was needed urgently, an ordinary Bulova watch purchased at the last minute. Unremarkable yet dependable, the timepiece wasn't NASA certified for spaceflight like the Omega Speedmasters worn by most astronauts. Still, in the subsequent rushed preparations, Scott elected to wear the substitute watch for the entirety of the 1971 Apollo 15 mission, including the first and only scientific moon rover excursion to date. The Bulova faithfully kept time for over 12 days in the extreme lunar and deep space environments. Afterward, Scott retained the unique watch as a personal memento. Decades later, as one of the earliest Rolex or Omega timepieces had achieved prices over $1 million at auction, Scott's accidental field watch gained newfound significance as the only non-issued chronometer to orbit and walk the moon. When it went up for sale at the RR auction in 2015, collecting fervor was immense. After protracted bidding, the unadorned watch that had witnessed mankind's third lunar landing sold for the astronomical final value of $1,625,000, over 3,000 times its original retail cost. Among Neil Armstrong's personal items returned from Apollo 11 was a small white sample bag, no larger than a thermos lid, containing minute residue collected on the lunar surface. Having held dust sieved directly from rocks that Armstrong and Aldrin gathered nearly half a century prior, its contents connected one to that unprecedented moment of first contact. However, the bag's provenance became dubious after being mislabeled in a Smithsonian collection. It resurfaced in the hands of a private collector who sought to authenticate the bag's trip to the moon. Only after NASA's verification of its container's role in transporting the largest lunar sample ever returned was its status confirmed. When Sotheby's presented the bag in 2017, surrounded by Armstrong's famous words, "One small step," tens of thousands watched its auction as it streamed worldwide. After protracted bids far surpassing expectations, a final bid of $1,812,500 was struck to secure ownership of those grains, representing humanity's initial grasp of another celestial body. Among Buzz Aldrin's personal effects from the epical Apollo 11 mission was the plain-looking zip-up blue cotton jacket he wore throughout the entire journey. Though conservative, the jacket gained iconic status as many witnessed Buzz wearing it during pivotal moments captured on camera. During the launch, lunar landing, moonwalk, and splashdown, the jacket accompanied Buzz's progression from the launch pad to the powdery sea of tranquility and back to Earth. Its fabric holds residual lunar dust and sweat from Buzz's endeavors among one of mankind's crowning triumphs. In 2022, on the mission's 53rd anniversary, Buzz's sole surviving flight jacket was offered at Sotheby's, where it quickly became the most valuable American space artifact sold at auction. Bidding rose exponentially until an unprecedented winning bid of $2,775,000 was struck, eclipsing all space records. Reaching the lofty penultimate place is a rare artifact of the early Soviet space program, a fully restored Vostok 3Ka-2 capsule that housed Yuri Gagarin on his landmark orbit of Earth in 1961.
It has a metal shell inside. On the outside, it's got the special material to deal with the re-entry into the atmosphere, which caused a great deal of heat. It looks like a great big cannonball, and the idea of a human being going inside this spaceship and descending into the atmosphere, in essence possibly being roasted, this metal cannonball that turns red hot, is so courageous, so extraordinary. Gagarin was a real hero. And a private individual could very likely buy it, but I think what they would do with it is they would loan it to a museum. This is a hard thing to take home. It would look odd in somebody's sitting room.
Weighing just under a ton at launch, the compact capsule bore Gagarin safely back through the scorching heat of re-entry after completing one revolution of our planet. Though extensively refurbished, its provenance was authenticated by RKK Energia. Purchased by online gaming mogul Richard Garriott, the new owner was no ordinary collector but a veteran space tourist in his own right. Having spent $30 million for a seat aboard the International Space Station in 2008, Garriott was uniquely positioned to appreciate this icon of the first manned spaceflight. When the capsule went up for bid once more at Christie's in New York in 2021, feverish enthusiasm pushed the final price tag over initial estimates to an astronomical $2.8 million. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Your support helps us reach more people with our content. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more updates.